All right. Welcome everybody. Back again for our new weekly football show we're going to be doing. You know me, Josh, and our guy B Dragon here again. He'll be my co-host for this, so we'll keep this going all season, hopefully. So coming back, first show we did for the season run was last week. They played Stanford over the weekend. We talked about that in depth pretty good. Not a lot of concern really on our part, at least going into that game, and it kind of played out that way on the field. Virginia picked up a 48-20 victory. First win as an actual ACC game, so that's big. First real conference game, starting out 1-0 is always great. Pretty much that game was handled very quickly. Trell had 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. It was kind of a bloodbath from the get go. Stanford, to their credit, did a little bit here and there that kept them in the game just to make you think maybe I should keep an eye on this, even if you weren't fully sitting in front of a TV watching. But it never really felt super uncomfortable either. So it was about what we wanted. Dragon, what'd you see in that game? Good and bad. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there wasn't a whole lot going into it. I love the way that the Who started. It came out strong. Obviously, couldn't ask for a better first quarter. One thing I thought was interesting was I can remember there being chatter about Tony Elliott always talking about winning the last four and the first four of a half. And I thought one takeaway from that game was that was an example why that's so important because you mentioned Stanford did kind of make it look interesting there. And if you go into the half, I believe right before the half, Hoosiers still up. They missed a field goal. Stanford goes down to score halftime. So instead of being up, I think it would have put them up about 28-0 at that point, or maybe even 35-7 or something like that. They go into the half at 28-10, if I remember correctly, and that's a much different ball game at that point. And then I can't remember who had the ball first come out of the half, but essentially either Stanford went down and scored immediately, or the Who's got the ball first. 3-and-out didn't show much. Stanford has the ball, has a chance to all of a sudden to make it a one-score game potentially. It didn't work out that way, and the defense kind of stepped up a little bit and got some stops in there, and the offense did just enough to kind of click back on and got some points. But it's one of those things where it's such a cliche to you hear coaches talk about winning the end of the half, coming out strong at the start of the second half, but like those are the little details right there where that lapse of judgment, that missed kick, like I'm going to harp on it. Like that's a massive difference. Like, that's almost a 12-point swing right there that it could have caused. And luckily, Stanford just wasn't able to capitalize on it. And Virginia was able to kind of keep it rolling. And then there's still some worries in the secondary. I still saw some guys kind of getting beat up a little bit, but I saw the defensive line come alive, which I was super happy about. We talked about that last week, kind of being the disappointing unit so far we've seen this year in terms of just not performing up to expectations. And I felt like Saturday night we saw them come alive and live up to expectations. So hopefully that's a spark we can see kind of keep rolling. And then the two negatives I would say for the game were, the first one I'll say is that second half lull that kind of started right there before the half. And, the commentators talked about it. Tony Elliott was really digging into the players and kind of getting into them. And it just felt like they took their foot off the gas a little bit there in the third quarter, maybe the start of the fourth quarter. And I just really wish they would have, and part of that was what the other downside was. It was the injuries. Part of that was due to the injuries and the shuffling that had to take place in the offensive line. And all of a sudden, what was a very crisp unit that was efficient looked like they didn't quite know what was going on.
Yeah, that's what I mean. In a game like that, just my perspective on it is it's very easy to get complacent when you build up a lead, especially very quickly as they kind of did in that one. And that's something that, Coach Elliott was battling most of the game. I saw a post, I mentioned it in forum too, about him. I wasn't at the game, but somebody posted that was in the stands could see everything happening. That when they went to the fourth quarter, of course there's a commercial break or whatever between quarters, there's a stoppage. Coach Elliott pulled the whole team in, like everyone was circled around him, and he apparently was pretty. I don't think colorful is maybe the right word. He probably wasn't too dogging them, but he was very adamant that they really needed to finish strong. They needed to take care of business. And I thought, like you said, they did kind of lull there in the third quarter, but then they really stepped it up and closed the game out. So I was, happy enough with that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of with you. The defensive line was much improved, especially as the game went on. Actually, I think it was the first maybe 2 drives. I was a little nervous. Like, oh man, we're still not really generating much pressure. This quarterback's not great, but if you give him time, he's still a college level arm. Like, it's not like he doesn't
Yeah,
feel,
he looked better on Saturday than he had in everything I've seen of him so far during the year. So I'll give him that credit. Like you said, when he had time, he was able to make some throws.
Yeah, for sure. And then, in the secondary, I'm still not sure about them. So it's kind of weird to think like I'm flipping where my disappointment is, from week to week. But watching them, I still don't know that there's a lack of skill there, I guess is the way I wanted to word this. I thought that even them, that there were mental lapses, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
Like the plays they were getting beat on was plays that they honestly would get caught napping or get caught looking on. Like it didn't feel like that they were outmatched in any way, I didn't think. Which it'll be interesting to see because Florida State's a whole different level of athlete they're about to have to compete with. So I'm curious to see, if we'll finally get some truth on if these guys can, say if they can run with receivers, if they can keep up on vertical plays, things like that. Other side of the ball, I thought the offense played pretty well. Obviously Trell had the huge first quarter. Chandler was pretty solid all game. The running backs, I think, look great. And, that's something that Florida State's testament to. We'll get into them more here in a minute, but they have a very solid running back room as well. Both teams already over 1,000 yards rushing on the season. So I think I've seen in points per game, Florida State's number 1, UVA's number 4 in the entire country. Both of them are up pretty high in yardage totals. It's going to be probably a shootout. We expect a game like this, and they'll probably end up being a dogfight. Like, that's just the way it goes. You expect these great offenses, ends up being a defensive slugfest. But my big thing, though, I think really looking forward to that coming out of the Stanford game is some of the injury concern that, kind of was picked up going through that. For anybody, that didn't really keep up or is kind of just checking back in, getting ready, hyped up for the big game, we ran into a little bit of an issue with an injury concern that I think is pretty significant on the offensive line. Losing Wilson could be a real problem. They're pulling up here. They have to put out the probability sheets, I guess, like who's, likely to play, who's already out, that type of thing that's required by conference play. He's in the questionable category. So not fully ruled out, but they've talked about, working reps in case he doesn't play. It's kind of not really sounding the best, in my opinion. I don't have any knowledge on that, but just thinking ahead, this is probably the game where we need him the most, I think. What do you think, Dragon?
Yeah, that's definitely how I'm feeling. His injury when he went down Saturday night was concerning. He's the anchor. He's what makes that line work. Not only is the most experienced player and definitely the most skilled player in the line, but also because of where he plays, it creates a really almost like a double knock-on effect because they have to move guys over and bring a guy in. And so it almost disrupts 2 to 3 positions on the field instead of just his one. So it's huge. That's just massive. You can't lose your anchor. You can't lose your signal caller, especially when you're getting ready to go against not just the best defenses the Hoos have seen all year, but one of the best defenses in the country right now. It's calling its home in Tallahassee. So that's a huge loss. It's weird. It's some sort of a calf injury. I believe it's what they're saying, a calf strain. It's kind of what I've heard it labeled as, which I don't know. Maybe I watch too much NBA basketball now, but anytime someone has a calf strain now, it's almost part of me just wants to say just shut them down. And because I don't want to see, what we saw happen in NBA playoffs. Swimming players, I know it's a different sport, but still a similar thing. It's concerning. There's nothing, I'm not going to sugarcoat. There's really no reason to beat around the bush. I don't know what happens if he can't go on Saturday at 100%. Especially because we saw when he went down, I can't think of who they brought in after. They were also on one leg basically, and there were several holding penalties, and it's just a general confusion.
Yeah, they brought in Wigginton.
Wiggins, yeah, exactly. Yeah, once he popped in, and he had 2 just blatant bad holding penalties as a result of just not being able to be mobile enough to keep up with what was going on. And again, the Florida State front 4 are the best 4 unit that the Hoos will face all season, and they need all hands on deck. So, and it was going to be a task with all hands on deck as it was. So it's only going to get worse.
Yeah, and it's especially concerning too because on that same injury report or probable report, whatever you want to call it, they've already said that Wallace Unamba will be out for the game. So he,
I saw
he
that.
missed last week. He's not going to be back again this week. We talked about this last week on the show a little bit. That right tackle has been kind of the spot of maybe a little bit of concern. Not that they've done anything really wrong, but it's just the spot you can kind of look at and see where issues could rise. So I mean, I think this is going to be a crucial game, not only for the team but really for the coaching staff. I mean, for them to really show what they can do, to show how they can try to maneuver. To you might be down a couple fairly critical pieces. I mean, it's no doubt that Brady Wilson's super important to what they're going to do. Missing Unamba as well is pretty critical in my opinion, at least. So just seeing how they can scheme around this and going up against what's going to be probably their biggest test of the year, and unless for some reason they were to make say the ACC championship or something like that, not expecting that by any means, but if they were to do something like that, they could maybe see Miami's line be better. But Florida State is no joke. I mean, they're legit,
Yeah.
very serious team coming into play Friday night. And kind of going into that, looking into that game, before we go too deep into talking, specifically about the game and the matchup, there's a real buzz around this. I think. I mean, these retro uniforms, if anybody's seen those, are freaking awesome. I mean,
Fire.
yeah, I
Fire.
think it's great. I'm really hoping they're selling those Friday so we can grab them. Like they're sweet.
Grab me one. I will get you back for it. I would love to have one of those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they look good. Everything seems good. It seems like there's kind of that little bit of buzz already that this could actually be something. It's so easy. Everybody wants to go back to the 95 game with the parallels. Like, it's just so easy when this happens. And it's crazy to me because, like, honestly, I thought the way that the 2019 game went, it was kind of the same way. Like we had all these parallels and the stop on the goal line, like all that craziness. Now it just feels like it's repeating itself kind of in a way. Like I said, we'll see how it plays out. But as far as the game goes, we did have a question on the forum asking, is this the biggest game of Coach Elliott's tenure as the coach here? So I'll kind of two-part that with Dragon. What do you think? I'll say it this way. This is the biggest game since blank, just for Virginia, overall. And then also for Elliott, if you don't have the same answer.
Wow. Great question. Biggest game going into it since, definitely the biggest game in Elliott's tenure. I saw someone on the board made a good comparison. I think Elliott has had more crucial losses, but biggest game and biggest opportunity without a doubt. I mean, I know a lot of people talk about the Virginia Tech thing and breaking the curse and all that. It's your rival. You want to beat them. That's all well and good. No one would take 19 to win over Tech over 95 when what we did to Florida State. It's just one of them is an ESPN classic for a reason. The other one is remembered within Virginia lore, but also it's just not the same. This is the number 7 team in the country, the team that has a legitimate chance to play for a national championship, coming to your house on a Friday night, so all eyes are on you because I believe there's only 2 other games even slated that night. Mm-hmm. If Elliott wins this game, he secures himself and gets himself an extension, I think, and barring something crazy happening down the stretch. But I would assume if they win this game, they're winning 5 out of the next 6 or whatever the schedule shakes out to be. So, it puts the program on a different level. Comps, I haven't been this jazzed for a game since Al Groh period, to be honest with you. We've had big games in that time, and there's been games I've been excited for because it's more so because I wanted to see the competition and see who was coming to town. I wanted to see that team, seeing Oregon for the first time, seeing the USC, Notre Dame coming into Scott State. Like, those are big games, but I don't think those weren't critical. I never went in any of those games thinking there was a shot, and there wasn't that there's this history of Virginia and Florida State. There's a legitimate history and a legitimate beef there. Like, it's real. You can feel that. So it just adds a little extra juice to it.
I get that. For me, I think I saw a comment about last year's Tech game being maybe the biggest of Elliott's time. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't really know that I necessarily agree with that. I do think this is the bigger opportunity for him. I think kind of like you said, I think not that if they win this game, that means he's going to get an extension next week. But I think if they win this game, it kind of sets those benchmarks of competency that we think they're going to be able to do, projecting for the rest of the year. That's kind of what I'm with you on that. If they can follow any type of trajectory that's even close to what it would be if they pick up a win, I'm with you. I think he'd get an extension at that point. I think really for the program, to me, people might not like this answer, but I think this is the biggest game since the last coach's final game against Virginia Tech. Because
Yeah.
to me, that was the one where he really had a chance to solidify, like, hey, our program has turned a corner and maybe is taking kind of the hold back from them. And I mean, just to be completely honest, we absolutely blew it. We couldn't have more embarrassingly lost that game, in my opinion.
It changed his entire tenure, basically.
It did. I agree completely. I think that night changed a lot of things, both then and honestly to where we are now. Like, I just truly believe that. But I do think, again, this is the biggest game for Coach Elliott and for his staff, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I'm listening to you talk, Josh, is making me think. I think the difference is those Virginia Tech games are more consequential short term, but there's not as nearly as much upside. This isn't to it. That's the difference. This Virginia Tech's not like Ohio State, Michigan, or some of these other major rivals where you're going to get canned because you can't beat your rival. Ohio State will fire a coach because they can't beat Michigan if they lose to Michigan. Ryan Day's still in the hot seat because he's lost 5 times in a row. He has a national title sitting next to him. They're still like, you can't beat Michigan. That's a very different animal than what we deal with here locally in Virginia. But I do think this has the most upside. Again, to your point, like Elliott, the coach, has pretty much been slacked since he showed up on grounds 3 years ago. If he can knock off the number 7 team in the country with this roster, with this momentum that this roster has as well, it's suddenly not a fluke. We hear every day someone's like, wake me up when they beat somebody. Wake me up when they beat somebody. I don't know what else you need if they can knock off Florida State in 2 nights, 48 hours from now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And kind of not getting too far ahead, but looking ahead too, I think you even talked about in the forum a little bit about the 2 games back-to-back playing Florida State and then having to go to Louisville next week. I'm going to take a slightly different approach with this one. And, barring any bad injury or issue like that, if everything's even and they're just playing these games, to me, I'm actually kind of excited for it. I'm actually kind of happy it worked out this way because for me, I'm more or less, honestly, as a fan, trying to evaluate what I think of the staff. I think this is their real, fair opportunity to be graded based off what they can do. So I kind of prefer them maybe to see some adversity, honestly. I mean, I'm not opposed. Of course, I want them to win every game. I'm not saying I don't. But I kind of enjoy this idea that, okay, they're going to have to turn right around, go on the road, and play what's been a historically pretty tough team to play. And a team that's good, too, in Louisville still.
Yeah, I mean, if they can keep the ship steady here and go 1-1, if they go 1-1 in this stretch, no matter how you split it, that's a massive win for the staff. Because it is. It's just this is a difficult stretch for any team or any program right now. That's a mid-level program like the Who's are, and like I said, to come off of, especially if the worst case scenario to me is they play Florida State, they play the Noles tight all night Friday and go down on some sort of a heartbreaker field goal last minute play, and then they have 6 days to turn it around and go on the road to Louisville where they're not going to have any fan support, and it's going to be a wonky stadium at 3:30 on the 4th, and you know what I mean? Like, that's a hard one to bounce back from. And how does the staff get the players back up from that to be that close and have it snatched away from them? But I like that confidence. I do think this is if you can walk away with it with a split, I think they'll be fine the rest of the season. I'm not going to worry about the rest of the season out of that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Going a little bit deeper maybe into the Florida State matchup now that we've kind of gone through everything else. Florida State's defense, I understand the offensive numbers, but their defense to me is what I'm most concerned over. Just because of the level of athlete that Florida State can get. It's not anything like what we have seen or truthfully really will see for the rest of the regular season at least. And that's just part of the game of college football, right? Like a team like Florida State, it doesn't matter that they went 2-10 last year. They recruit, they portal, everything is a different level of competition for them. And it's going to be tough for the Hoos, even a fully healthy Hoos team. It's kind of nerve wracking, like thinking about it. I'll be honest, I'm kind of nervous about it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're not, I'm excited for it, but if you're not nervous about this game, you just aren't being realistic with yourself. I see Josh with your question about the FSUD. And Josh, you mentioned, if the Hoos were to go to the championship game and maybe play Miami, they might meet a better unit. I would take a coin flip with the way those two. I'll maybe take Miami's unit right now slightly ahead of FSU just because they've been tested a little bit more. That's the one knock on this FSU team is if you look at them, they haven't been tested since Bama. Mm-hmm. They played Kent State and Alcorn State or somebody random like that. I believe it was in week 2. So maybe East Texas A&M. Sorry, even worse than Alcorn State. Maybe the numbers are a little inflated, but that said, they're getting up 10 points a ball game, which is silly. They've only given up 20 or 30 points on the season combined right now. So yeah, they worry me. And like you said, and it's because they're athletes. They remind me of some of the old Florida State teams we've seen, years ago back in the heyday of Bobby Bowden. And it starts up front. It starts that front four that is athletic and they get after the ball. And they're moving them around a little bit. So they're not just coming at you straight. They're able to run a couple little twists at you. And they have enough athletic skill in the back end that they can trust that backside to cover, and they can get a little creative there with their linebackers over the middle. And so it's going to be tough. I'm really grateful that the Hoos have a senior quarterback who's seen pretty much everything there is to be thrown at him over the course of his previous 5 years in college. So that's going to be massively helpful. But it's going to be tough. Do we move the pocket to protect Morris? I think they're going to have to probably move the pocket a little bit, just given how the line's beat up. And Morris seems to be very comfortable throwing on the run. The downside of that, though, is when you put him on the move, you cut off half of his targets. And right now, I would argue perhaps what makes Morris the most dangerous right now is the fact that the Hoos are able to deploy 3 and 4 wide options downfield to at least try to put some stress on the secondary and make the secondary have to make decisions. Now, does that hold up when all of a sudden you're playing a secondary that can guard you one-on-one and doesn't need to bring help over top? That's where it starts to get dicey, and we might have to get a little bit creative. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of on the same page. I do think, they're going to have design plays where they're moving the pocket a little bit. I feel like at least if it were me, I would be trying to get some quick hitters using some of the kind of twitchy speed that this offense seems to have. Guys like Cam Ross, how fast that they can get in and out of cuts. I think I would be trying more for that as opposed to trying to get things going down the field. Now, you can't do this all game, obviously. Like, this ain't going to be, every single play. But I think they're probably going to be better if they can deploy some different sets with tight ends and with backs to help block. For me, I'm kind of hopeful that Sage Ennis has the game of his life and he doesn't have a single receiving yard. I'm hoping it's because he is just laying waste to edge rushers all game.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm hoping for. I think we talked about this on the last show a little bit. A concern of mine, not that it's really been super shown outside of the one play against NC State, but it does seem to me that Chandler, for even being a fifth year player or whatever, if you rush him a little bit, he can make some hurried decisions, and some of that hasn't always really been the greatest. So I trust him. I feel good about him, but I'm also like, okay, we're really going to learn a lot about him as far as a high level of competition goes.
Yeah, we did talk about that last week, and it's funny because ever since we had that conversation here last Wednesday, it was ringing in my head all day on Saturday watching the game. And if you watch some of those plays that he threw up there, even to Harris in the first quarter, they're not good balls. If you're being very honest about it, it worked out, but they weren't smart passes. They're the passes that any coach on the sideline is one step away from chewing them out, and it just worked out the other way. So I don't know that he can get away with that again with some of the more better coached and more skilled athletes that they're going to be seeing here coming down the stretch. But I also think this is a game too where I think tempo could be massively helpful to wear down that Florida State front 7 really, to keep them on the field and not let them sub out. And then I think this could be a great opportunity too for the Who's to deploy. They have 4 legitimate running backs. I think they all 4 need to have 10, 15 plays at least, just touching the ball, constantly switching them out, touching the ball, like bringing them in the block, bringing in multiple ones there. So maybe you're one's blocking with the other one's going on the route or whatever. Like, I think this is a chance to kind of deploy some of that, use that army of riches that you still have available to you and deploy all of it to try to keep that Florida State defense off balance and keep it guessing as much as possible.
Yeah, which that's another one. Just pulling it up here, looking real quick. So on that same injury report, Corey here had a question on it too. So Corey, we already talked about the offensive line a little bit. If you want to watch back a little later, we talked about Brady Wilson is questionable at this point, so we'll see where that goes. Elliott's been pretty clear, transparent that they have been, working situations in case he can't play, which of course you expect him to, but just to be talking about it kind of makes me feel like maybe he's not going to be able to play.
Yeah.
With that, Wallace Unamba, we talked about that earlier. He's already ruled out. So right tackle, will still be playing. We'll see how it goes with Whitmer. The other thing, though, that I wanted to mention while we're talking about the running backs, though, is Noah Vaughn also ruled out for this game. I didn't think his injury looked good, but I hadn't really heard anything yet. So knowing that he's out kind of settles that.
Yeah.
See the same comment, too, on the other side, Corey saying that Florida State has 2 running backs out, which I think they actually have a pretty deep running back room, too. I think they have 3 or 4 legitimate options.
They're averaging 363 yards a game. They have a deep running back.
Yeah, they do. And I tell you what, they have a wide receiver, too. I think his last name's Danzy. It's a freshman. But that kid is a blazer. Like, he's got well over 100 yards receiving, over 100 yards rushing this year. Like, he's just been a weapon for them.
Yeah.
And he makes me all nervous because I think he's the real game-breaking speed for them. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe we'll go ahead and transition over, go and start talking about defense a little bit. On that side of the ball, like we talked about earlier, I'm kind of nervous from what I've seen from the secondary. But at the same time, I feel like I'm kind of getting weirdly more confident as each week goes because it feels like the defensive side of the ball, we're actually getting healthy.
We are. That's a massive thing, and I'm still holding out. I believe I know Cam obviously made his debut last week and looked like he hadn't missed a step, which is amazing considering, for the most part, he hasn't taken a snap since last season, basically. And then I saw where someone said that Clary got in the game. I don't recall seeing Clary get minutes actually last week, but, if he did, that's great. I think, again, that's the key to me. Can we get him back to shore of that secondary? Can we get someone in there? Because you're right. What I've seen in the secondary breakdown so far has not been a lack of skill. It's been a lack of they're mentally dialed in or understand. I don't know if they're not understanding the coverages or someone's looking into the backfield for too much for some reason and they're just getting sucked in. And then it's a slow reaction. But every game this season, they've basically been burned by someone running right between the corner and a safety. And usually it's because someone's looking in the backfield at some eye candy that's not even really that good eye candy, comparatively speaking, to what you see it a lot of times now with the RPOs and stuff the teams run. And so I just don't know if some guys are just unclear of their assignments or what's going on, why that still happens. I mean, once a week, basically, at least once a week it happens. And I don't quite understand what that is. So hopefully getting a little healthier, getting a little bit more veteran leadership in that back end will kind of shore some of that up. So.
Yeah, it's been hard because, most of these games, the caveat being the Florida State game or the NC State game, obviously, they've gotten up pretty quick and they've kind of handled and coasted. And I think that's been part of the issue is mindset, really. I think there's been a lot of coasting and just like we said earlier, getting complacent, something that Elliott was trying to fight, a lot last week. But I'm kind of curious now to see, I'm hopeful that those types of plays were just burned into them in the film room. I hope going over it, it's like, hey, listen, you got away with that against maybe lesser competition. You're not going to do that against the number 8 team in the country Friday night. Like you have to be dialed in every single play to have a chance at beating Florida State.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's you have to hope that it's one of those things where, it's just drilled into them. Those mental errors, like that's the difference. Those are the difference makers in a game like this, especially when you're the underdog, is you have to capitalize on every mistake that Florida State's going to make because they're going to make mistakes. They still do. but you got to limit the self-inflicted wounds and those sort of things, not being clear on your coverage, the silly holding penalties, which to their credit, the Hoos have been good, keeping laundry off the field, but it's just keeping everything kind of on the up and up. Hey, speaking of UVA legends right here, we got one in the chat. What's up, buddy?
There we go.
Need to get him on to talk through what's going on with our special teams. How about that? Can we
That would
talk
be
about
great,
that?
actually. Maybe next week we could try to do that. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, because that might be, speaking of self-inflicted wounds, that could be the one that I'm sorry, I have no faith in it. If it comes down to it
Yeah,
on
it's
Friday
starting
night.
to it's not looking good. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat that. The problem for that position specifically is the results are so black and white. Like there is no in between. There is no
Yeah.
decent play. It's either you do or you don't. That is it. Nobody cares any other way. And unfortunately, it's been more don't than do. So it's an area of concern. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, you can't. There's no way to beat around that.
It's like as an offensive lineman, we often say similar things. No one knows who often your right tackle is, generally speaking, until the right tackle has 4 bad plays and gives up 4 sacks, and at which point he's the worst player and his career's over, basically. Kickers are the same way. You might know who they are if they hit a big kick periodically, but generally speaking, they're just kind of another piece of the puzzle until they start missing, and it's suddenly, they're the most hated, disliked person on the team. And the chip shot missed, and then the make looked like it was a knuckleball from Tim Wakefield going over the goalpost there. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but in a game where points are going to be at a premium, and there's a good chance this could become a shootout of some sorts. You need to be able to capitalize on every possession, and if you're not sure if your kicker's good from 35 in at this level of college football, that could be trouble.
Oh, for sure. Kind of going back to it on the defensive side, one number I did want to bring up. We talked about the yardage numbers, being first and fourth in the country. On top of that, as far as offense goes, Florida State number 2 in rushing yards in the entire country. So that's something. Honestly, for me, like the part of the reason I feel better about that is Cam being back. I think Cam plays so far beyond his years, if that makes sense. Like, I don't feel like I ever see him missing an assignment. There's things that happen. Obviously, some strategies don't work. This or that, different coverages, different blitz packages, whatever. But it feels like he knows his assignment. Like whatever his job is to do, he's going to do it. Whether that works or not, it's not always really his fault as a player. But just having him back, I think, helping to shore up like gap assignment, especially going up against this running game. I feel pretty confident that our defense can hopefully hold up there.
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's going to take a big game from Cam, like you said, making his reads and reading his keys. But I do think those Florida State numbers are a little, don't get me wrong, that backfield is explosive and it's very good. They are a little inflated. When you're scoring 70 points on a team 2 weeks in a row, you're scoring 60 plus 2 weeks in a row. They've basically been running the ball about 75% of the time from the second quarter on. And so their carries numbers are just kind of absurd when you look at them. So I think that's inflated the number a little bit, but you're absolutely right. I think having a healthy Cam, and I like the fact that Cam got a chance to get a ton of reps under his belt and see some live action as well, just to kind of, if there was any ring rust there, he shook it off. And we're going to need him to be, he's going to have to be Poindexter. He's going to have to, give him the number 3 jersey and let him see if he can pull one out of the hat. Because that's what they're going to need from him. That's from a defensive effort. He's going to have to get double-digit tackles.
I think you're right. I mean, I don't think there's any way around it. These are the games, like you play these level of teams, you have to play a darn near perfect game, and you need your stars to be stars. I mean, that's just part of it. Like, that you're on this level. And I think you're right. I think he's going to have to be the guy Friday night.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got to set the tone. He's got to, if he comes out of there with anything less than 12 or 14 tackles, it's not enough. And that's heavy as the crown, heavy as the head that wears the crown. He's the best player in that defense. He's the captain of it. He's a leader. Mm-hmm. And like you said, these are the games where that person has to show up and do those things. And, know every key, know every read, know exactly what's coming at them and capitalize on it at every opportunity.
I agree completely. Kind of have thought this. I'm going to bounce around a little bit now, just general Florida State talk. Um, Castellanos, I think everybody knows Boston College last year. The Who's have seen him a few times. I don't know. Maybe if Josh saw it, he could throw it in or something. I seen a graphic, but I'm pretty sure it was a fake about him talking smack specifically to us. I don't think that was real. I
Because of what
think
happened to him last year when Boston College came to town? Is he
yeah,
still
yeah.
mad
See,
about that?
it was something. The graphic said something about Bronco in it, and I was like, I don't think this is a real thing.
I don't care if it's
I
about
think it was
Bronco.
just
He talks
trying to
trash
play
about it
off
all
of. Now
day.
he had some pretty serious trash talk for Alabama, over the summer, and I
I
think it was
remember
just kind of
that,
a
yeah.
play off of that. I think I mentioned this on forum too. I think personally, it's been refreshing to see a guy that talks like that, and he has actually been able to back it up on the field. I actually appreciate that. I enjoy. I think we made this comparison last week. Chandler like a Baker Mayfield. I enjoy that persona too, on top of like the on field. Like if you're gonna talk, be about it. I appreciate that from him.
Absolutely. I'm all about it. I think what's fascinating to me about Tommy is he reminds me of that movie. You might be a little young for this one, but that what was it She's All That, where you take basically every 90s high school kid movie, you take the nerdy girl, you take her glasses off, and she gets a makeover, all of a sudden she's the coolest kid in school.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel like Tommy is right here. Like he went from being completely unimpressive for, for the first 3 years of his career to suddenly he's talking trash and he's out here, high stepping. But not but. The but is if you look at his stats, he's kind of average this year at least. And,
Yeah.
and part of this is he hasn't been asked to do a lot, but he's 594, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, QBR at 91. He's averaging was it about 200 yards a game, something like that. Like he hasn't been called on to do a lot this year. So it is possible that he has a regression back to the mean of who he is. And that's the same guy who was coughing up picks for Boston College a year ago when he came to Charlottesville. And I think that's definitely possible if the Who's can get after him and get him off his square. So, I'm glad he's talking a little smack. I'm glad he's having a little fun out there, enjoying being in the Sunshine State. I'm sure it's nicer than being at Boston College, but let's see. He had all summer to prepare for Bama. He hasn't had to play a serious game since then. So let's see where he actually stands. Let's see if he's actually made the improvements that he thinks he's made.
Yeah, and that's part of where I was going to go with it. Just to play a little bit of devil's advocate, he hasn't really had to be called upon to do a lot outside of Alabama. And just if we're being completely truthful, I don't really even know. I mean, yeah, they beat Alabama, and that as a name, it rings. It sounds big time, and it is big time. I'm not saying Alabama's not, but like, is this Alabama like we think of Alabama? Is kind of where my thinking goes. Like so far, I mean, what's Alabama? They beat Wisconsin, which I don't know that Wisconsin's really on.
They're about to fire their coach here.
Exactly. So that's kind of where I'm at. This will be the first road game for Florida State. They're a month into the season. They're finally leaving Tallahassee.
Yeah, I mean, it's his first road game test. I mean, he's a veteran guy. He's been around. I know. I see what you're saying, Zay, man. Yeah, I say he was coughing up picks. I remember throwing picks against the Who's. I didn't look at his whole stats for the year, but okay. Last year he completes 61% of his passes for 1,300 yards and 8 yards of an attempt for 18 TDs and 5 picks. That ain't lighting it up. That's not. Those aren't scary stats. It's essentially what the Who's just faced last week in Stanford's quarterback. So yeah, I think you're right, Josh. If you can get him, he's going to be in a new environment. It's going to be dark. Weird things happen at Scott Stadium overnight. So maybe that plays into it. But I do think he can be rattled. And I do think that he can be, made more pedestrian. And I wouldn't be surprised if Gus is going to put him in a good position. I think Malzahn is one of the surprise coaching arrivals of the year for me overall, but he does have a way of putting his guys in a good position. So I think he's going to try to give a heavy dose of the run game and try to protect him and keep him to short passes to get him warmed up until he feels warmed. And then they're going to, let him eat. So it's up to the Who's to kind of shut that down early and try to keep him in check. And I think they can. Like this isn't Cam Newton coming to town. This isn't when Marcus Mariota came to town. Like he's a good quarterback, but he's not a superstar. He's not the reason for Florida State's success right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think answering Josh's question a little bit, I think we see some packages, but I think that's something that they're going to have to time right. I think again,
Yeah.
that's like I said, part of evaluating the coaches is you play a team like this. Obviously when you blitz, right, that means you have somebody extra going, so that means there's a gap somewhere. There's some extra responsibility somebody has to take on to help compensate for that. And this isn't really a matchup that you want to necessarily do that a lot if you have to. Like we don't want one on ones with
Yeah.
averages of that caliber. But you can't go to a whole game only sending four either. So I think this is something where they're going to have to time it up. This is something where I think Rudd can earn some good faith. I guess is the best way to put it. I think if he has a pretty masterful play calling game on the defensive side, it could go a long way.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly it. I love blitz happy teams, but you're absolutely right. The key to it is the timing and the nuance of when you deploy those blitzes is as important, especially in a matchup like this where on the edges they just have so much speed and so much talent and ability. You know, you can't miss. And so those blitzes have to be kind of timed out. They have to be timed at the right time and they have to make sure they get home. So when you're sending them, they got to get home because if they're half second late, you basically just you get to give up a chunk play.
Yep.
So they're going to blitz. You've seen Rudd step it up, in places. He's sent some guys. They've had him run a few more stunts up front with the front four, and they played a few games there. So I imagine that will continue. But this isn't going to be a Steve Spagnuolo defense all of a sudden, where you start seeing guys coming from every angle. 60% of the time. That's just not. That's not who Rudd is. Unfortunately, not unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just not his DNA.
I'm kind of bouncing around a little bit, but I've seen a bunch of good comments here. Jeff's got a couple here. So first, I agree with this completely. The way, like we said, the way you pull these upsets is you play a dang near perfect game, and doing that is generally speaking, you're playing efficiencies and percentages. So yeah, absolutely got to stay ahead of the chains. If you're the Who's, we can't be having 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8s. We don't want that. And then on the flip side of it, of course, if we can make Florida State face that, a 3rd and 8, get a holding call, all of a sudden it's 3rd and 14 or something. That's great. Like that's what we're aiming for, and we've got to hope that we can keep that pressure on them the whole game. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the key, and that's where I actually would go as far as I would like to put the game onto Tommy Castello's shoulders, and I think you do that by putting him in 3rd and 8s, 3rd and 9s, and then that's where you can deploy that blitz package, and you can get him moving off his mark and have him kind of really have them make and think to make plays down the field, and not just. I mean, he doesn't, and not just take what's available to him. So getting those early stops is going to be key. I think that's where, again, we want to go back to stopping the running game up front. I think we're going to see a heavy dose of the Florida State backs, and we need to show the Who's need to show from the get-go that those can't be 4 and 5 yard games on first down. They have to be 2 and 3 yard games.
Yep.
It's just staying on schedule is just going to be key. It's critical in this game.
I agree completely. And I think that's something where these two teams are fairly similar in that both teams are going to want to try to establish the run as early and as often as possible. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think if we can just kind of do strength on strength with that and we can try to shut them down a little bit, I think it only bodes well. I mean, obviously, you say that for any game, but especially a team like this where you want to make each play as difficult for them as possible to try to have a chance at something. I think you're right. I think that we have to be geared in. 1st and 2nd down are critical in this situation just to force those longer thirds.
Yeah, which it's interesting that we're sitting here and we're talking, ad nauseum about how important it is to stop the run and how important it is to run the ball. And this is a game that's over under 60.
Yeah, right.
It's like Vegas is everything that Vegas is telling us is that the hell of running, they're going to throw the ball around and score some points. But to put my gambling hat on, it's hard not to think that when you have 2 of the highest scoring offenses in the country, and I feel like something's got to give.
Yeah.
I don't. This game just doesn't feel like shootout to me. It doesn't feel 35-32, or 42-45 or whatever. I don't get those vibes out of it at all.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I could see this game being like that time that we had to go to BYU, and it felt like they just kept breaking 60-yard touchdown runs. I mean, I guess something like that could happen. I don't. I'm kind of with you. I don't think I see that necessarily, but I guess that's kind of the mindset of what could happen based off the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is possible. But I mean, that was also a historically bad defense that the Blues took out there. But that season, I mean, that season was a whole season of the Hoos having to play and win games 65-52 and craziness like that. So I don't think that this is one of those games. I do think we see a regression back. I think we're going to see a little bit more of a traditional Virginia ACC old school game where it's, I think we're going to see a score 28-25, something like that, 31-25, somewhere in that range. I could see a combined total of 50 some points, but if that total is nipping around 60, I would go as far to say something went very not good for the Hoos, or very, very well, but it's going to be a lopsided way to get there.
I threw this comment up from Jeff because it kind of got me just thinking a little bit about the weird things that we've seen. He's absolutely right, though. I mean, we had Castellanos very confused. He had a pretty awful second half. I mean, last year, and the deciding play ended up being into the same situation, a best on best. Cam Robinson stripped him, took it back to the house. I mean, it was a heck of a play. It made me think, though, the thing I was thinking about was, Daniel Jones. So he's NFL quarterback. He didn't get off to a great start, but he's having a big resurgence with Indy this year, so good for him. But I sat and watched that guy get picked off 9 times in 2 games against UVA. So just thinking about like how, different teams can just confuse quarterbacks. Like some people just have their weaknesses. Hopefully that's where we're going with this with Castellanos, I guess.
It's funny. That's an interesting comparison. And my takeaway from that is, generally speaking, by the time you get to this point, especially by the time you get to be a 4th-year player, 5th-year player, like a Morris or like a Castellanos is, or even like a Daniel Jones was, you kind of know who people are, and they are exactly who they thought they were. Thank you, Denny Green. And so I have a flipped argument and say Sam Darnold is a guy that we got to see a whole lot, and he got off to a very slow start in his NFL career. Last year, he gets off to a really, really hot start with the Vikings, and then suddenly when the lights are the brightest, he's the same Darnold. He's exactly who we thought he was. He just was awful in that playoff game. And I think, that was kind of what I was betting on last week with Stanford's quarterback. I'm like, we know who he is. He's going to be exactly who we thought he was. And I think we're going to see the same thing. More of it as more responsibility falls on Tommy Castellanos' shoulders. You're going to realize that he's okay, but he's a middle of the road career quarterback. And that can be knocked off a square. And absolutely, Jeff is right. Like, I mean, we had him seeing ghosts in the second half last year. I mean, that was as bad of a second half as the quarterback has put together. And he's going to want to come out and try to, attain for that. And hopefully it catches him and forces him, to be trying a little too hard. And maybe throws a pick or costs him another one for us.
Throw this up. We have a visitor here, Florida State fan, coming in. 34-27 prediction. Our guy Jeff going a lot lighter, 17-13 Hoos. I think for me in this game, everything up here is telling me, like, truthfully, don't pick the Hoos to win this game. Saying a cover is probably not the worst thing in the world. I could see like a 31-27 loss maybe. But everything in here though is telling me like there's something different about this. Just you get this feeling, like maybe it's just the blind love for these alternate uniforms that I'm hoping will just become a regular occurrence. But everything is telling me like somehow they're going to pull this thing off. So I'll take this one. I'm going to go. I think they're going to get a field goal. I think we get a little bit of redemption. So I'm going to go 31-27 Virginia. What do you think, Dragon?
Oh, gosh. Everything in me says that we're going to see a flashback to 95. Everything, I want my Hoos to come out and have a great game. I just have a hard time seeing it. The spread's just teasing me. It's down to 7 points right now. I do think they cover. But I do think you end up seeing a 35-31, somewhere in there, Florida State. I think the Noles come away with it in a hard-fought game. But I just think they're just a little bit of a different animal right now than what the Virginians ready to take on. It's like I said in the chat. I just feel like it's unfortunate. But it's just bad timing, and I think they're a little too hot, a little just better. And but I think the Hoos can take solace in the fact that they're going to be right there with them and not be blown off the field. It's just going to, that 1 or 2 play difference. It's just going to be the difference maker this one.
Yeah, for sure. A game like this is going to be a fight. I mean, just to even stay in the game, the Hoos are going to have to play a very close to perfect game. That's the type of team that they're dealing with here. But I'm excited for. Like I said, I welcome this challenge. I'm excited to see what they do. And anybody that's getting ready for prep, the best thing I can say to do is just try to watch for any reports on injury statuses. I really do think the offensive line is the biggest key in this game for the Hoos, and the healthier they can be, obviously, the better. So if you're looking for something, that'd be tuning into whoever your source is that has good info, keeps up with that the best. Whichever reporter you think does well, watch that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be the biggest telltale, and that's probably why I'm a little bit hesitant on backing the Hoos all the way. Is your line starts getting banged up. It's just hard to overcome that, and especially against this particular unit. And so, I'd rather us play them hard, give them hell, and if the shots are there, take them. If not, that's fine. But it just may not be our day on Saturday or Friday, I should say.
Well, we'll certainly find out fast. It's quickly approaching. Again, for anybody trying to keep up, so this game is going to be Friday night. Most probably remember, because it wasn't that long ago, that college football kind of used to rule Thursday nights. Well, NFL Thursday night football, the whole prime deal kind of took that over from the sport as a whole, not just from Virginia, not just from Florida State, not from the ACC. The whole sport is kind of is backing down to the NFL a little bit. So now it's Friday night. That's our night of the week for big games. And
All right, high schools.
Yeah. So tune in Friday night. We'll see how it goes. It's the marquee game, and it leads into a huge college football weekend. There are a lot of really good ranked games that I'm pretty excited for the fact that we won't be playing on the same day as all those games, just so ours is over with and my attention can turn a little bit more to those. I'm excited as a fan to watch these games.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great, great weekend. I mean, I would love to be able to kick it off with the Virginia win on Friday night, and then just be able to sit back and enjoy. Like you said, some of the big games. You have Bama, Georgia coming up. You got some really, really sweet matchups coming up across the country on Saturday. So hopefully, we're all kicking back, laughing on the forum, and sitting there basking on the fact that the Who's just knocked off the top 10 team.
Yeah, I'm watching for that big Penn State and Oregon game. That's the one I'm most excited for, I think. Ole Miss LSU's had some fun twisting stuff with coaches and all this and that.
Yeah,
It's been fun, but
yeah, yeah. Both of them be great games right there. Yeah, has Penn State played anyone? Who knows? We'll see what they can do. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the weekend. Let's bring it on. Let's chop it up. It's the heart of the college football season. Weather's changing in some places. It's go time.
Oh yeah, and Jeff's right. We're confident going into this. We'll see how it goes. Hope for the best. Either way, though, Dragon and I will be back here next week. We'll be looking ahead to the Louisville game, and we'll be kind of projecting the season from there to see where we are. So, good luck. Rest up. I did see, for anybody still following, that I think Friday's supposed to be a blue out, I guess you would call it. They're encouraging everybody to wear blue. So if you're coming to the game, blue's the best to go for. Like I said, I'm going to be looking. Hopefully, they have some of those sweet new jerseys out. We can get a hold of those. But until then, go Hoos. We'll see what happens this weekend.
Go Hoos.